Ladies and gents, boys and girls, good to be back for another episode of the Body Beauty Show. Today I'm joined by arguably let's see, 007 tried to recruit him for their latest film, and he declined because he's too busy. We are joined by arguably one of the most anticipated guests on the show, Nigel Franklyn, the spa whisperer who's chiming in from Bavaria. Yes, on the other side of the Atlantic to join us on the show today. Nigel, we're tickled to have you on. How in the heck are you?
Thanks, Austin. I'm great. Actually, it's been, we've been planning this for a while, haven't we?
So I think so.
Yeah, it's good to actually get on the call with you finally. But I'm doing really good. Really excited to speak to you.
It's been awesome. We've been trying to tee this up for about 6 years now, and finally got the schedules to align. So it's a good thing that we can pull this off. So, well, between all your international traveling and helping different entities like small names that I'm sure no one's heard of, like the Four Seasons Hotel and the like, we finally made it happen. So I think what we'll do today, Nigel, to get the listeners oriented around who you are, what you do, that sort of thing, is to give the listeners a peek behind the review curtain of Nigel and your experience working with Verena here from the Four Seasons. So listeners, a bit about Nigel, then we'll get into the meat and potatoes of the show today. So from Verena, this is her shout out, kudos, praise for Nigel. It's rare that you come across a standout talent like Nigel. I had the pleasure of working with Nigel in several spas for about 8 years at Four Seasons Spas, collaborating on several team trainings. I was particularly impressed by Nigel's ability to jump right into our spa ops, to become a part of the spa with the staff and the guests while with us, and even handle some of the toughest and most resistant therapists effortlessly. From day one with us, our retail sales raised and our team members became incredibly confident. The skill to take away resistance from therapists on sales is extremely rare, but it seemed to come perfectly naturally to our team being surrounded, encouraged, coached, and inspired by Nigel. It was always a sad moment to see Nigel leave, but we couldn't wait until he returned 6 months later. And any team, closing note here, any team would grow their sales by training with Nigel. In short, Nigel is the superhero in the spa space. And again, we're glad that he's here. So that preamble aside.
That was Four Seasons George Sank in Paris. So it was wise of me to make sure that they wanted me back every 6 months.
Certainly. Yeah. Slightly huge account, I would imagine. So, anyway, well, let's move on. So listeners, in a nutshell, actually, why don't we do it like this? I think it's helpful to hear from you, Nigel, what you do exactly. So in order to set this backstory up on you, I think what we could do here is something that is a bit of a two-part question. So with your origin, how you came to be, that sort of thing. So if I had to guess, I would assume that part of the reason for how you came to be who you are today, the work that you do, serving the spa wellness community as the guy, Four Seasons, they get in the boardroom, they have an issue, they look at each other and they say, who do we call? And they all unanimously say, call Nigel ASAP. So part of the reason that I would imagine you came to be who you are today is that you had some sort of crux moment where you had this feeling and you realized in that moment, hey, this is a feeling that I got to find a way to bottle up and share with the world. And presumably the spa venue was the best venue to do that. So can you speak a bit about that feeling and the moment where that feeling arose, maybe in childhood or whatever?
Yeah, it's actually a pretty clear moment. So I grew up in the UK, in Brighton, and lived most of my life after that, for the last 30 years, certainly in California. So after I graduated university, I graduated with English and journalism and moved to California to be a writer. I was going to go sit in San Francisco and I was going to write a book on a hill. And so I actually did. I was in California, I was in San Francisco, and I was a journalist. And I went to write for the opening of a spa. I tell this story so often, but I went to write for the opening of a spa in just outside Atlanta, Georgia. And so I met my therapist. Her name was Margaret. And I remember everything about this person. I remember it now. I remember she was wearing a green cardigan with a ladybug. I remember her lipstick, her hair. She lived in the house she was born in. She's completely untouched by the world. I mean, she was super, super special. Her name's Margaret. I called my dog Maggie, for God's sake. And she, for the first time in my life, she made me feel safe and wanted. And I had never really experienced that. I grew up, I didn't have parents when I was growing up. So I'd never really experienced it. So I had this random stranger, and she made me feel safe and she made me feel wanted. And I came away from that. The story actually was about the feeling of surrender. It wasn't even about the treatment itself, because I actually don't remember that, but it was about how she made me feel. So I was so moved by it that I decided to become a therapist, because I wanted to give that back to the world. Right? I thought it was such a cool thing. And so I became a therapist, and really kind of quickly figured out that I was one person, and what I needed was an army. And so there's articles about me, like online, if you look, and it's like, I meet the guy who created his dream job. And that's really essentially what I did. And it's so I created this job where I went and I empowered therapists around the world, and I created this army of therapists who were able to give this Margaret moment back to everybody. So and that's kind of like randomly. I always tell people, like, I'm deeply underqualified to do anything that I'm doing right now in terms of like spa design, right? Because I'm now, back then, and what I was doing with Verena at the Four Seasons Paris was going into pre-existing spas and really developing the business. But from developing the business from empowerment and, creating kind of emotional intelligence, certainly, or at least offering it to the therapist. But yeah, and now I'm, out in the world designing the spas themselves. But it all comes from this one therapist who I will never meet again. I've decided, even if I had the opportunity, I wouldn't do it. But it all came from that one moment in a spa just outside Georgia, and it changed the entire direction of my life.
How old were you when that happened?
29, 30.
Wow.
Yeah, so maybe yeah, right around 30. But this was, listen, I mean, I got into the wellness industry before. Well, there wasn't a wellness industry; there was a spa industry, and you know, we were like building, like hotels are like, we need a spa. Where do we have space? And invariably, it's always in the basement. It's always by the laundry. So, like, for the first kind of years of my career, we were building spas in basements, and we were just kind of considered a facility,
Yeah.
and not this kind of like, kind of revenue generating, transformative, all these words that we throw around now. There was no industry back then.
When did the industry take a turn to where there was a shift? Speaking of shifts, which we'll get into shifts in a minute. When did the industry change its tune, let's say, to where it shifted from, hey, you're basement dwellers, that's where you belong, you're next to the sewage tank and the laundry? And when did it become what it is today, where now it's more mainstream, etc.?
Yeah, look, I mean, I have this kind of idea that, I don't know why I have this idea, but I had this idea that it changed kind of 10 years ago. But then it changed again 5 years ago, and it's changed again. Well, certainly in the last 12 months, it's changed again. But, this kind of, there was an explosion of it. And then, and then there was a lot of noise about it. And then there's been a lot of evolution from it, right? And so I would imagine, I don't know, I would imagine 10 years ago, only because I worked on my first non-basement spa in Bangkok. And that was about 10 years ago. And it was a really big deal that this place became kind of it was like the center of the hotel. And I was one of the first. But, you know, we even struggle now. I mean, wellness has exploded so much now that it's almost like there's been a separation. There's the spa industry and the wellness industry. And the challenge and the trick, I guess, is to try to not necessarily bring them together, because they tend to be quite separate, but how you can kind of very uniquely elevate one without taking the other one down. I mean, they're just two very different experiences, but there is a point where those roads cross. And I'm talking about spa experiences like, like very kind of transactional stuff. You go in, you get a massage, you have a glass of prosecco with your friends, and you jet. And but then like wellness experiences, which are curated and transformative, you know, and like empowered and powerful. And those are the things. I'm in the wellness end. I mean, I'm a therapist, but I don't believe I was ever in the spa industry. I always wanted to turn the spa industry into something more engaging, you know.
What do you mean by engaging there? Because the way I unpack that is off the back of the transactional bit is, you know, for example, I am a member of Massage Logs and I go get a massage every, you know, Thursday.
Yeah.
And I go in, it's very, you know, sign here. You're in
Yeah.
the third room. Get out. It's like, what? You don't want to hear about me? You don't care? I'm just a turn and burn item on your P&L? What?
Yeah.
So is
Well,
it
look,
that? What? Because maybe there's an opportunity to help folks understand that there's more value in, if it is a transactional antidote, in terms of them distancing themselves from that mindset. So
well, listen, I
engagement,
mean,
what does that look
but
like?
that works for. I mean, there's the percentage of the population, and that really works for them. It's a very transactional. It's a very physical thing, one-dimensional physical thing. But I remember one of the first times, so one of my first ever treatments in San Francisco, and after the treatment, after the massage, I was kind of like, I was chatting with this lady, and just kind of having this conversation, and she kind of left. And then she came right back into the spa like 2 seconds later, and she said, "I owe you an apology." And I said, "What for?" And she said, "Because I never thought that you would know that." And I learned two things. Well, first of all, I learned that I look like an idiot. Secondly, I learned that people don't know to ask you what they don't know. You know, they don't understand that there's that opportunity to have this kind of pretty cool conversation about with somebody who's a wellness professional, you know, like a trained well-being wellness professional. And so when I started talking to my guests, you know, they were all like, what's he doing? And, you know, why is he talking? And then it goes to like, oh God, he's going to talk. He's going to try to sell me products. And so there's, you know, you know, spas are really vulnerable places, right? You're butt naked and you've got no makeup on, your hair's gone to God, and you're having a stranger touch you. So there's a really big element of, and a really big responsibility, because once you've got somebody surrendered into this point where you can really, you know, do some good therapy, once you've got them to that point, there's a responsibility that you don't abandon them, because then their experience of that time with you, or that treatment, or their time at the spa, their experience of it will be abandonment, not the treatment itself, you know. So, you know, because of what I do for a living. So my friends, if ever my friends go to a spa, they always think they need to tell me about it, for good or bad. So what I've learned in that is that they can go to, you know, a pretty good spa, but they didn't connect with the therapist, or there was some, and their perception of it is bad. Or diversity, they can go to, you know, a pretty crappy spa, whatever that is, but a pretty crappy spa, and they can have a real good connection, really good connection with their therapist, and their perception of it is, of that spa, is very positive. So, you know, I learned really early on that spas are just bricks and mortar. You know, you can't have a transformational experience. You can't learn anything from bricks and mortar. It's the people in them that are super powerful and super important, and those are the people that that need to be recognized. These kind of these wellness doers, these wellness givers, you know.
Yeah.
And that's why I think when you navigate your way through this industry, you know, we now have wellness architects and wellness designers, and it's really important for those people to understand the industry itself, because I've spent half my life trying to develop spas that were clearly built and designed by people who had never set foot in a spa in their life, and that is true. That is true for 100% people in my position in this industry.
Wow.
Yeah.
So as I hear you talking about the engagement piece, I can't stop thinking about the role of EQ, or emotional intelligence, and Daniel Goleman's book on the topic. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but really this is a shout, a call to empower the staff of wellness centers, spas, et cetera, to maybe take the time to reflect on and maybe even evaluate your therapist on their ability to exude high levels of EQ so that you can have that engagement and foster the feelings back to the feeling that you had in each interaction with each client.
Especially now. I mean, I can't imagine that those traits have ever been more important than now. I mean, there's a lot of talk and there's a lot of discussion. I do a lot of webinars and there's a lot of discussion about the anxiety of guests and bringing people back into the spa, but we fail a lot of times to talk about the anxiety of the people who are delivering wellness themselves, you know. So we talk about the therapists and the demands of therapists more now than ever, you know, because now we've kind of, you know, before COVID, you know, you couldn't really discuss mental wellness because it was a little bit confronting, you know. It's like, who are you? You're telling me I'm crazy. But now we can because it's on the table. But then that's another arm of wellness that we have to engage our therapists in, and we have to train them in it or empower them to develop their own kind of, as we see, their own kind of emotional intelligence. I think it's super important. Like, I mean, I do like stretches on a plane. I do them now. I spend my life, well, I did until 12 months ago, spend my life on a plane. I do stretches on a plane that someone in spa taught me 15 years ago. I have asthma. I do shiatsu moves on my chest if I'm feeling a little tight that a therapist taught me 10 years ago. Like, these guys have the most power and the most influence of anybody in a wellness experience, a wellness journey, but they are often kind of, you know, it's not underrated is a bit harsh, but, you know, they kind of come second place in terms of, you know, spa design or the, you know, the spa menu or the, you know, the you know, the focus should be on the heartbeats, you know, these people that are actually delivering it. And that's why I find that's where the quote that you were just saying with Verena, you know, from what I know, I was kind of like a little bit of a maverick kind of out in the world, kind of like going into, and especially in Asia where the culture is quite subservient, I would go into these spas and therapists would be afraid because they didn't speak English. And I'd be like, well, you know, nowhere on this menu does it say our therapists speak English. I mean, that's just not an expectation. And so these therapists would like try to struggle with their English, and I would have them stop. And like, if you don't understand it, if you don't mean it, don't say it, because then the roles are reversed, right? Because then if you're the therapist and you're struggling with English, then I, as the guest, I become the therapist, because then I'm suddenly like, it's okay. And that role of surrender, that kind of, this kind of art of therapy where you bring somebody into this space and you, you know, in the nicest possible way, you dominate them, because you have to be the person in charge in that environment, because you're creating a transformative experience. And it's difficult to do that when there's one person trying to take the control away from you. So, you know, so that's what I was doing, traveling around the world, yakking at therapists, trying to bring them out of their shells.
So how do you teach that? Because I think about how I've learned and am still learning to fine tune the dials of emotional intelligence. It's you know, even having read the book on emotional intelligence, for example, which is the only one that comes to mind from Daniel Goleman, which is a great read, by the way. It has some interesting bits on, you know, the architecture of rapport, which is threefold: mutual attention, warm feelings, and that social synchrony where you're not overstepping each other. You know, you finish your sentence, you feel heard, they hear you, they repeat back, and there's no like you need a talking stick in this conversation. None of that. But still, how do you teach that? How as you know, me, the spa owner, how would I go about empowering, teaching my therapist? And we'll get into how he should care for them and invest in them in a moment. But specifically on this EQ bit, what can the average or any spa owner for that matter do to invest on that front?
Do you know what Watsu is? Watsu, water shiatsu. It's water therapy. It's water shiatsu. You take someone in the water, you kind of perform these kind of shiatsu moves on the surface of the water, and then you kind of sync with their breath in phase 2, and you kind of take them under the water and do stretches. So the key to the Watsu is not what actually happens in the pool. The key is what happens before you get into the pool, because you have to have that connection. You have to have your guest feel surrendered, because otherwise they're just going to have a stranger hold them underwater, right? So there is an art to it. I mean, there's an art to therapy where you do understand that, my thing when I was a therapist, I always liked the end bit. I was kind of a lazy therapist. I was just like, but the end bit for me was really good because I got to like, it would almost be like, yeah, I did this. Like I would see the faces and these people like on, just in another dimension. And I would be like, yeah, I did that. But I loved that idea that I was able to take people to this kind of complete space of surrender, because that's where it lives. The only way that it depends. Like I would try everything. I mean, God, when you start out in an industry that doesn't exist, you just throw whatever you can at a wall. But even like with therapists, I would have them talk to me about a treatment, and they would like be nervous or well, partly nervous because they were talking to me, but just nervous in general. And then I would have them talk to me about their favorite food, pizza, or their kids, and their energy would change. And we would then get that. So then we had a blueprint for their actual energy, not their energy in the spa or their energy talking about an alien subject. We had a blueprint for how organic their energy really is. And so we would focus on that blueprint. And you would be surprised at how people just how people are just waiting for the permission. It was, and it's not 100%. Invariably, what would happen, I would go into a spa, and there would always be, one person that was resistant for whatever reason. But those people always tended to kind of shift out of that spa and find another space that suited them specifically. There was a therapist in Australia and she just wasn't getting it at all. And so she gave me a massage and she broke every bone in my body, but she enjoyed it, right? And she never smiled or anything. But after the treatment, because I was a mess, she was smiling. And I said, you don't belong in the spa. You should work for a sports team. And so it was in Australia. And we I mean, I don't know anything about sport, but we kind of like, we helped enough to put her in touch. And now she's one of the sports massage therapists for the Australian rules football team. I mean, because that's where she belongs. She doesn't belong in this conversation where we're talking about enlightenment and surrender, because she was a beast and an amazing one. But but she just didn't, that just wasn't her bag. So we had to put her somewhere that was part of her DNA.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a very pronounced role for acuity with how you slot different people in different positions. In this case, with this gal, you're not fit for this because you have Herculean hands, but NFL players would love you.
And she's amazing. And she's amazing. And we message still, and she just loves it. I mean, her thing was she was, just trapped in this spa industry, and that's really, she was not a spa therapist, she was a sports therapist, and that's where she just lost her way. Now she's found it. But I mean, that's what you do. I mean, it's part of bringing people forward into their light is, understanding also that maybe their light isn't the same. Maybe we just don't share the same light. I mean, it's all part of this kind of emotional evolutionary process, I guess, right?
Yeah. And I think there's a tethering into a couple disparate notions that you mentioned that I think are actually very closely related. Number one is this notion of asking for permission, and the therapist feeling like they need to ask for permission. Maybe we could talk a bit to that and unpack how we can encourage the therapist to stop feeling as if they need to ask for permission, and how that might weave into what seems like a domination paradox. So you mentioned this idea of, if the therapist isn't leading, I necessarily have to lead by suggesting, hey, you don't speak English, it's fine, you don't need to just, I like, it's like I want you to dominate me. And these are the wrong words for the sentence.
I know, for sure. I know.
So to be very clear,
I don't work in
dominatrix.
I don't work in those kind of spas.
Sure. Yeah. But that's the idea, right? Is that there's this necessity to, maybe we'll approach this from a different vector. So maybe it's something like this, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because I think we're we're getting into something that I think paralyzes a lot of therapists with their career growth, with their advancement, with their job satisfaction, with their general well-being, et cetera, is they feel handcuffed in some sense. And I don't know what the product of that is, if it's a lack of EQ, if it's a lack of empowerment from their leadership to say, hey, if this person comes in for this problem, but you can tell it's this or whatever that looks like, do the this, not the that sort of thing. So how do we help these therapists that are maybe feeling underappreciated, handcuffed, or otherwise? How do we liberate them? And maybe we're speaking to the spa owner here who
yeah, look, I mean, you have to understand, I mean, you know, people are driven to therapy for very specific reasons. You know, there's a need to nurture, a need to heal. I mean, there's also, I mean, I'm romanticizing it. There's also certainly the element of people that just come, you know, because they just needed a job. But for the most part, in my experience, you know, people are driven by this need. And so I find it really strange, right? So when spa owners and operators, when they interview therapists, like, I can't imagine they say to themselves, that's a great therapist, they'll make a really good robot. But then when they come into the spa, that's exactly how that manifests, you know, because they trap them in standards and, you know, and a lot of these big hotels, the corporate hotels that I work with, I get it, they have global standards, and I understand fully the role of global standards. But wellness, the standards from wellness, you know, if you're in a spa, you shouldn't feel served, right? And these kind of standards are very service oriented. So when you're in a spa, you shouldn't feel served. You should feel wanted, and like I did with Margaret. And so you have these kind of therapists who are driven with this need and this kind of very altruistic ideals, and I need to nurture and heal, and they go into these spa environments and they're trapped because they have to ask if the music is okay, is the temperature okay, is that twice, is the pressure okay, twice. And these are things that if you leave a therapist by themselves, if you just leave them alone, of course they're going to ask, is the pressure okay, because they're therapists. So of course somebody whose nature it is to nurture and heal somebody, of course they're going to make sure that their environment is, you know, perfect for that person. But once you start demanding those things, we're therapists, and I am one. We're super emotional people, and so once you start demanding those things from us, it takes a chunk out of us emotionally, and that's where we start kind of giving up. And it's important for spa operators. You know, one of the challenges I always make for them is, you know, what they need to do when a therapist comes into the spa in the morning, like the therapist looks at their schedule, they shouldn't see treatments, they should see people, because each person has a unique interaction.
Yeah.
So, you know, I always challenge my therapists. What are you going to, what are you going to do? Because I challenged myself, how am I going to change this person? What am I going to say to this person? And it takes you out of that kind of status quo of, I mean, again, the reality is if you come into your spa and you see your schedule and you've got 8 deep tissue massages, of course you're going to check out. I mean, that's just, I did the same thing. But, you know, but if you come into the spa and you've got 8 deep tissue massages, there's a bigger question to have about management for giving that to you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. I mean, therapists are super powerful people and super emotional people. And so it doesn't make sense to take these kind of super energetic, super passionate people and put them into a box that you have created. It would be better just to let them fly. It's a bit cliche, but you know.
I think one analogy that might resonate with owners of wellness and spa centers that are thinking, hey, I hate to admit it, but that's me. I'm the one giving them 10 deep tissue massages a day, forcing them to dehumanize my customer base because I don't see them as humans or people. I see them as dollar signs.
Yeah, for sure.
And we have to curb that. There's got to be some way to place focus on people over profit, because I think this is the paradox. And I see this in various industries. Different friends of mine, you know, in industries spanning finance, of course, and wellness, everywhere. And it's this: they exchange the long term for the short term temptation of myopia. So instead of humanizing each interaction, you know, Nigel, you're here. How are you? How are you really? How are you feeling? Instead of, you know, the alternative, which is dehumanized by saying, "All right, yeah, you're down the room, room 3, suite C, get out."
Yeah.
Which that's an extreme example, of course, but
I mean, it's a good example. I mean, you know, one of the things that even if you're going into a spa and you have the spa reception, I mean, the spa reception should be treated as a treatment room. I mean, that's part of the spa. So if you're putting all of your back of house stuff in the front of house, if you're basically essentially putting an office in the middle of a spa, you know, people are coming out of their treatment rooms and, you know, they're in bliss and they walk into the reception and, you know, the reception is just crazy. I mean, the natural reaction is for them to kind of try to protect their bliss. So they just want to get out of there as quickly as possible. But that's also the space where the retail lives and the treatment rebookings live, right? But to your point, even just having your receptionist when the guest comes out, rather than just saying, "How is your massage?" Because that's either a good or bad answer. Say, "How are you feeling?" Because that's engaging, because people in bliss want to share their bliss. And so asking someone just "How are you feeling" gives the guest the permission to share their experience. So it's not just a good, because if you say to someone, "How was your massage?" "It was great, thanks, she was lovely," or "It was, you know, crap," you know, whatever. But if you're asking how you're feeling, it's a much more engaging, emotional question, and it will get a much more engaged and emotional reaction.
and practice owners, I think, is a byproduct of that, the very thing that you're hungry for, which is allegiance, repeat business, adding to your BBB, and seeing your P&L grow in the right direction. You've got to take the time to do this. And I think there's two things that come to mind here. There's a way to make someone feel infinitely important in the span of a very finite moment. So meaning, you know, we have a 5-second interaction. For example, I imagine if I were to meet Gandhi or someone of equal merit, let's say, if I were just to get a hi from him or a hello, how are you? I bet you I would feel like the centerpiece of the entire universe, even though that moment was passing 5 seconds,
Sure.
10 seconds. Whereas the same person who doesn't ooze the same intentionality, inviting vulnerability in my own response, I would feel the exact opposite. And then I'd be like, that guy was just he didn't get it. He didn't get it.
I actually teach, because with the therapists, I actually teach this in 20 seconds. So I have a 20. So, you know, what I do with the therapist, I sit them all down. I'm like, if you don't think 20 seconds is a long time to engage and connect with somebody, let's just sit in silence for 20 seconds. And you can actually see how long that is. And we sit in silence for 20 seconds, because that's really all you are. And I do this because they said Gandhi, and I'm going to chase up now. I'm going to one up your Gandhi. When I was 15, I met the Dalai Lama, and I was given 20 seconds. I mean, that's pretty much how long you were given. And I was like, do I have 20 seconds? And I got so much. It's strange that you just said this, but I got so much out of it. And it was, I mean, we didn't have to sit down and have dinner. I was just in a line of people, you know, but it was 20 seconds of time with him. And it was the longest 20 seconds of my life, and the most powerful and the most beautiful, et cetera, et cetera. But the 20 seconds is so key, because when you're saying to someone, connect, find out something about them, and the therapist is like, yeah, but we only have 15-minute turnaround. I'm only asking for 20 seconds. That's it. Yeah. I'm not asking for you guys to sit down and chew the fat and share your life history. I'm just asking for you to 20 seconds to connect, you know. But it's also why I don't like foot treatments in spas, because I'm here to empower therapists, and I'm like, you're empowered, now get on your knees in front of me. It's a horrible, foot treatments are horrible for that reason. They feel lovely, but for that reason they're horrible. But also it annoys me because the spa treatment rooms are the domain of the therapists, no one else. And when I go into a spa treatment room, I expect to be on eye level with my therapist. And the best way to do that is for you both to hop on the bed. Like, I get it, you know, there are hotel standards, it's 5-star or not, whatever. But in that moment, in that treatment room, that's not the point. The point is to connect. And so I have therapists jump on the bed and they're freaking out. We're not allowed to jump on the bed. I'm like, just jump on the, let's see how it feels. Your next guest, promise me you'll sit on the bed with them and get on their eye level. It's important because, like, if you don't do that, you're less inclined to engage, like as a guest. If you don't do that, you're less inclined to engage with your therapist. So, if the massage is too strong or too whatever it is, or if you need them to focus on one part of the body, if you've connected with them, you're more comfortable. I mean, I would do it anyway. I'm sure you would too, but I would, but for other people, if you've connected with the therapist at the very beginning, you're generally more comfortable to engage throughout the massage. So you get the treatment that you actually want and need rather than some kind of random spa menu treatment protocol, because we all have to stick to the steps. And if it doesn't suit you and you haven't connected with the therapist, you're just going to lie there and shut up. And it's nobody's fault, but your perception is negative. So we have to take away this idea that service in a spa gives people the perception, a positive perception, because that's not always the case. Connection, emotionality, experience, like all of these things are positive perceptions in terms of wellness, and service isn't, and it's so when therapists arrive, so depending on where they are, but I think generally guests see the therapist in three ways. First, they'll see them as an employee. Second, they'll see them as a therapist. And then third, probably not, they'll see them as a human being. And what's important with therapy is you spin it around, because first thing they should see in front of them is a human being. And then, because, I'll give you an example. So if I was a therapist and I was dealing with a pregnant woman and she came in, she was 9 months pregnant and she wanted a deep tissue massage. And I was just like, yeah, hi, I'm Nigel, I'm your therapist. We can't give you this massage today. And she's, it's combative. But if I've kind of like, had a little bit, oh my God, is your first baby? You look so, whatever it is, like just had this kind of human connection. And then I approach the fact that she can't have the massage. The interaction is seen very, very differently. And there's no combative action at all. She actually sees me as one human being that cares about the other human being. So these are just like really cool. This is why I call myself the spa whisperer, because like horse whisperers, they kind of go up to horses, they whisper something and the horses suddenly goes from being completely feral to something beautiful. And that's kind of what I do in spas. Like I don't go in and make these big changes. I'll go in and make these little tiny ones like this, like changing the dialogue, switching how they present themselves to their guests. And then these tiny little steps make this much greater change. So I'm not going in there and like, oh no, he's asking for us to change everything. It's not true at all. Everything changes, but not because I'm changing everything. I'm changing these kind of fundamental blocks that frankly have no position being, no place being in a spa. Even things like, therapists call it the hand hug now. Like you'll never see me shake hands with anyone with one hand, because if I shake it with my one hand, that hand tells you my name. I put the other hand on your hand, that hand tells you my intention. And the intention is the important part, right?
Yeah.
So I do it always outside of a spa. But yeah, shake hands with someone with two hands and it just dismantles whatever wall is between you and that person, because they're not expecting it. It's the hand hug. I didn't call it the hand hug, therapists do.
I think the reason people are leery to do that, maybe two reasons. We'll come back to the service not being servile bit in a second. The first reason I think they're afraid to do that is there's this perhaps primal resistance and hesitation to be vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And when you convey your intention, hey, my intention here is to serve you as best I can, no matter the cost. Yes, I'm going to give you a hand hug. Maybe that makes you feel like, I don't know, some sort of way. And it's not normal, the pattern that I'm expecting as a consumer, a customer, whatever, in my interactions with the therapist is, they're going to come in and say, what hurts today? And then they're going to leave. I'm going to get down to my underwear, get on the table, and then they begin. And there's no engagement. That's a pattern. So when a therapist decides to be vulnerable, which is hard, turns out, to do that, because there's risk you know, I mean, not like we're going to be chased by saber-toothed tigers because we're past those days, obviously, but there's some anxiety around being vulnerable in the particular context of expressing your intentionality, let's say, which is to serve, I think. So how can we unlock that? How can we help them?
Well, listen, look, I mean, listen, if it is to serve, then yeah, I mean, I wouldn't, like, you know, the Four Seasons George Sank, I wouldn't necessarily advocate people at, you know, at the check-in, you know, doing the double-handed handshake. But in a spa, it's your intention is to heal and to nurture. And that's the intention that you put across when you to let somebody know, I've got you, you're safe, you can shut up now, just relax, let me just do my thing. Because it's not service. You know, we're not in the service industry, we're in the wellness industry. And so our standards are vastly different, and they should be. So we run into that trouble where people confuse the two, and they try to get therapists to operate under service standards. And that's not the goal.
Is part of that due to the fact that service and being servile or pandering, or to your point about the being willing to tell a woman who's 9 months, you know, basically due to have her baby at, you know, the drop of a hat on the table with you, it is, you know, as I think about that situation, most people will be like, ooh, potential customer, money, I'm going to give her the treatment, I'm going to give her the service, and it doesn't actually best serve her. So what I'm really being is servile because I'm not giving her the thing that she actually needs. And this, I think, bleeds back into that dominates.
The difference,
paradox.
the key difference, right? There's a difference between effective and being efficient. Efficient people do things right. Effective people do the right thing. And you always have to have an effective, you should be effective, whatever job you're doing, and be effective. I probably admin people can probably get away with being efficient, but I think mostly, especially with therapists, you have to be effective, because it's a labyrinth of situations you find yourself in when you're putting your hands on a naked human being, and in every way. So, I mean, I just think making effective choices and being effective, and I think people respond to that. I'll tell you a story. I was at a spa once, and a guest came in. This woman came in, and she was just, for no reason, she walked in. You know, you just meet those people, and you're just like, wow, not for me, thanks. And it was just energetically just bizarre. And it was just awful. And so I ran up to a therapist, and I was like, your next guest is here. Protect yourself. White armor, like do whatever you can. And she said, you, the spa whisperer, of all people, you are telling me this. And she said, leave it to me. And she went in to give the massage to this lady. And the lady came out, and she physically looked different. Like physically, she looked like a different person. Obviously, energetically was off the charts. I mean, she was amazing. But it's just like, you know, if you're stuck with, if this therapist is stuck with the protocol, if she had been just efficient, but this woman would have come out in exactly the same condition. But she went in, and I don't know, you know, I asked her, what did you do? And she said, I gave her what she needed, just some love. And that was it. And this kind of transformation, this kind of art of therapy doesn't exist on the bed. It doesn't live and die on the bed, I should say. It's everything else that happens, you know. So for spa operators to understand that your spa, the guest spa experience doesn't begin and end in the treatment room, doesn't begin and end in the treatment bed. In order to make it a multi-dimensional, transformative experience, then you have to use all elements of your space and all elements of your staff. Teaching your receptionists to talk like therapists. You know, there's teaching them about, we're all narrative people, right? We respond to storytelling, which is, you know, why we have fairy tales. So, you know, having your receptionists talk more emotionally and less transactionally about treatments, having them paint a picture for your guests of how they're going to feel, even with facials, you know, how you're going to feel during the facial or after it, not necessarily how you're going to look. And that's a really good way. You know, massages will always be the bread and butter of the spa industry for sure. But if you're trying to look for some kind of balance or diversity, at least between your massage facial ratio, the easy way to do that is just talk emotionally about the facials, the same way that you would talk about the massages. And that's one way also for spa owners to get the receptionists engaged, because the receptionists always feel like they're just on the sidelines of this industry somehow, but in fact they're super, super important. I mean, was it all the time as important as the therapist? Some of the time, sometimes more important than the therapist, because they're the bookends of the experience. And so yeah, I think creating an environment where everybody feels included, that everybody feels that they have the ability and the empowerment to be effective, gives us a much more of a kind of stable approach to treating wellness as a revenue generating space. Because there's always hotel people and they speak numbers, spa people, we speak emotion. And then somewhere between the two, there are people in my position who are trying to kind of bridge it and turn one into the other without affecting either. It's a difficult one.
To me, the revelation is, as an entity embarks to grow and scale, and perhaps I would say something to the effect of corporatize. So they're growing. Of course, with growth comes red tape, bureaucracy, a lot more spreadsheets, targets, numbers, goals, etc. And we lose that humanity, which is the very thing that leads to growth. And there's that tension there. So I think the operators on the ground level that maybe oversee the therapists, and certainly the therapists themselves, of course, have the work of figuring out how to develop that acuity with EQ, with being vulnerable, doing things like you mentioned, sitting at the table side before the session starts. Hey, how are you feeling? What can we work on today? Whatever that looks like. So is there any, this is maybe a bit of a loaded question that we could presumably talk for weeks on, but what advice would you give owners that this message is resonating with and been thinking, okay, I've got an opportunity here, maybe not so much a problem, but an opportunity to empower my therapist so that I can do two things: preserve the humanity and that emotionality and the emotive responses and all that. And then simultaneously, as a byproduct of that, allow myself to be set up to scale as I corporatize. Maybe I become a franchisor and I create franchise locations, et cetera. How do I balance and navigate that tension as an owner?
Well, I mean, it depends on a couple of things. It depends on what your vision is for the spa, first of all. And if it is something, if you're wanting to just create money out of increasing massages, that's one business model. If your vision is to provide spaces of, I keep saying this word transformation, I need a new word, but but understanding also that the thing that galvanizes really our industry is in terms of guest loyalty, those kind of things. Those things exist in the connection, in rebooking, empowering your therapist to, for example, I almost spoke German then. For an example,
please do. I'm sure our
no,
German audience would love that. You are in Bavaria, so.
I was like zum Beispiel no, I forgot what I was going to say. Oh yeah, so like for example, like with therapists, empower your therapist to be able to say, okay, Nigel, this is what we worked on today, but I want you to come back and get X, Y, and Z. Those kind of things. That's an empowered therapist. Like when I was a therapist, I hated 60-minute massages. I hated them. I just, because you can't get off protocol, and it's just, then you've got to clean the room, and it's just a nightmare. So I created, for my schedule was always exactly the treatments that I liked. So I love to do facials, and I loved to do longer treatments. And I was lucky that my spa director really just was like, go do, because she got so many good reports about me that she wouldn't ask me to do anything that she wants. She would just like, go in there and do your thing. And in fact, that's what I tell therapists now: just go in there and do your thing. Because then you get people coming back. And you get therapists who are empowered to ask the guest back. And that's good if you're kind of a day spa, certainly. But also, I mean, that works to a limit. Also, if you're in a hotel spa with, obviously, transient customer base, but it doesn't make sense for spa operators to treat the spa like a normal business. I mean, there's just a way to manage therapists. There's a way to develop therapists. And then, the idea also, and the other thing, you also just can't keep throwing treatments on the menu expecting, better or newer results, because then everything just becomes confusing. And people's reaction to chaos is that they shut down, right? And so if your vision is in chaos, if your spa menu is in chaos, people are just going to go to what they know. So you'll spend your rest of your spa career doing Swedish massages, 60-minute Swedish massages. I guarantee it. I mean, because people aren't going to try the other things. And it's the therapists, those are the therapists who are going to want to go out and get further education and bring kind of more esoteric treatments into the spa that actually have value, have therapeutic value, but also have value because it anchors that therapist. If you're supporting your therapist to go out and get further education and bring new treatments into the spa, it anchors them to the spa. And so your therapist turnaround ratio is better. But it's also, I think guests want to anchor themselves to a person and to a space as well for these kind of very intimate experiences, vulnerable, intimate experiences. It doesn't serve anybody, especially if it's a local day spa, it doesn't serve anybody to keep going back to the same place, changing therapists. So I don't know. I mean, it would be unwise to think that a spa is just where you go, get rubbed, and leave. I mean, there are spas like that, but that doesn't serve anybody, the therapist, the business, the guest. It doesn't serve anybody in the right way, I don't think. I mean, it's not my experience. There was probably some spa operators like that.
He's wrong. That's how I treat my customers. They're cattle to be milked for revenue. No, you're wrong.
I mean, there's just a fine line. I mean, we walk a tightrope here, don't we? Because we're trying to say, yes, I am here because I genuinely, authentically have this altruistic need to nurture and to heal you. But however, I also need to make some money. And so, it's a tightrope, but I err on the side of the empowerment, because Richard Branson, he always says, the thing he says, take care of the staff take care of the business. And it's cliche now, but it really is that mentality. I mean, and these therapists are going to be there for 8 hours a day. What good are you putting out into the world if you're making a toxic environment for somebody to spend 8 hours a day in? It's just not part of the DNA of wellness.
Yeah. Don't forfeit the long term for the temptation of myopia.
It's true. I mean, it's true. Look, I mean, I take much more value, right, than if wherever I'm tell somebody what I'm doing, what I do for a living, and if I mention a spa that I've created, I find it much more valuable if they don't mention the spa, but they mention a therapist by name. That has value to me. Like what I've created doesn't, who I've created does.
It's more meaningful.
Not that I have the power to create anybody. It's either in them or it's not, but you know what I mean.
Sure. Yeah, I understand. Well, wow, there are, I don't know, 1,000 topics we could chew through. I think we got through one so far, and we haven't even scratched the surface, of course.
This will be your longest podcast.
Which, great. Amazing. Great. Let's continue. I have a few other things I think would be interesting to nibble through. So a bit of I don't want to say a lane change, but something like that. So I'm gonna do something that I don't know if any wellness or spa podcast has done. I'm gonna cite Marcus Aurelius, and I have a question off the back of that. So here's the setup. So in the Meditations with Marcus Aurelius, which if you haven't read, listeners, I would strongly implore you to pick up a copy and grab a highlighter, because you're going to be destroying that book with all the highlighting. One of the lines, though, from Marcus is that you can see, or let me back up, quote, you can see how mastery over a few things makes it possible to live an abundant and devout life. For if you keep watch over these things, the gods won't ask for more, end quote. So here's the question off the back of that setup. What would you say for the listeners are a few of the things that if they could master would lead to long, abundant lives? And of course, this is a bit of a reach because I'm not talking about duration. I'm talking about more revenue, the quality of the experience for the guests, their own growth, anything within that venue.
What would I?
Could be habits, etc.
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, for a spa operator, you mean?
Yeah, for the spa owner, wellness center owner. I think the therapists have got quite a bit of meat to chew on. So maybe we'll speak to the owners and operators of these.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think look, I mean, you have to find the space for your vision. I would caution anybody to come into this industry purely from this perspective of a revenue creating business, although really that's really what it is. There's just too much emotion and potential involved in this for it to be this kind of very singular dimensional approach. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how to fully answer that question, really, because I think creating your vision and staying with your vision, because businesses take over so often. I mean, you know, bills need to be paid, different choices need to be made. And I think if you first make sure you come into this industry with the right intentions. I mean, it is to embolden and embroider people on the armed physically, emotionally, mentally, environmentally, all these other things. And try to stay with that. But I think if you stay with that, then you will draw close to you the right people. I mean, I've been in medical wellness environments where we've created these very kind of beautiful, soft, experiential treatments. The reason we did that was because they shouldn't be there, which I always think is super interesting. But stay creative. I mean, there has to be more creative ways in this industry to secure revenue than kind of beating it out of your vision. That, I'm not sure if that really answers your question or not, but
no, it's great. And look, we did just give the listeners a lot to chew on in terms of things that they can inspire to master. Again, to recap, things like empowering your staff, your therapists to be unlocked, let's say, in their controlling their space where they do the treatments that they offer and that sort of thing.
Listen, if you don't trust your therapist, if you don't trust the therapist, if you don't trust your therapist with your guests, then don't hire them. Yeah. I mean, it's really that simple. If you hire them, trust them, let them do their thing.
Or don't hire them if you don't trust them as a corollary, right?
Yeah. But I mean, that business model, I'm aware that is a super difficult business model to manage, because ultimately people do need to be managed. We, as therapists, we do need to be managed, but there's just a very specific way to do it. That's all.
Yeah. So we'll change gears here again a touch. Now, offline, we've been talking about the distinction between trends and shifts, and I think we alluded to this earlier on. Trends are, at least as I'm interpreting it, something like a fad. It's temporary. There's no durability in terms of duration, etc. Whereas, yes, your nemesis, to hell with trends. But shifts, though, those are durable, long-term, more permanent changes in thinking, that kind of thing. So what are some of those shifts that you're seeing in the space that some might be overlooking? Anything come to mind?
I would start with just trends. The problem I have with trends is that they are short-lived and they come with capex. That's it. And so why invest? I mean, just don't. I mean, otherwise you'll be, you know, the proud owner of 6 sets of bamboo shoots for your bamboo shoot massage, and nobody wants it. You know,
Yeah.
I always throw bamboo massages under the bus, and I really shouldn't, but I always seem to. They're kind of my go-to, and they're quite lovely. I don't mean anything bad, but it's some others. But shifts, as you said, shifts are different because shifts are shifting in everything from a shift in emotional expectation, physical expectation, expectation in general. And those things are long term. You know, we're going through a shift right now, actually post COVID, or semi post COVID at least. We're going through a shift where people are more are shifting more toward mental wellness, and that's something that not only do we think people in, you know, people with my gig, I mean, not only do we think that that's going to stay, but we're actually really desperate for it to stay. Um, that's not a trend. And so shifts are like long term. I mean, some of my projects that I'm working on now, which I'm kind of finding ways to kind of juxtapose, you know, ancient practices and philosophies with modern technology. I mean, I feel like that's a shift because the key there is that we have ancient philosophies and wellness practices, and so those things obviously have been around for 2,000 years and have some weight behind them. But giving them some scientific clout as well is super important. You know, it's so that's also a shift. But I think the biggest one we're seeing now is how we take care of our mental wellness. And that's, you know, there are others. I mean, I think COVID-19, there's going to be shifts to more kind of natural experiences, natural products. I told you, I have my own natural product line, Moss of the Isles, and we're finding a really big shift toward interest in Moss of the Isles. And people are asking more about, you know, we have a really pretty transparent supply chain because we're a natural product. And so it's important, you know, we have a story to tell, and it's important that we tell the story with each, we know the story of each of our ingredients. So we have, you know, we promote our ingredient supply chain so that people understand that not only is the product natural, but everything along the way has been handpicked, sun dried, and but people are now more engaged in those kind of stories, and I think that's the fallout of a positive fallout of COVID-19. You know, before COVID-19, there was some talk about forest bathing and more time outdoors and taking wellness outdoors. That's kind of, I think, getting stronger, which I fully support. The other thing, I do this thing, consultants in conversation. I do this every the first Tuesday of every month, and it's me and some of my colleagues, but they're my wellness tribe. They're my core wellness family. And we've been discussing biophilic design, which I think is super interesting as well. And I think that's going to stay. But so biophilia or biophilic design, when you basically bring the outdoors indoors. So with, you know, with living walls and things like that. And in fact, we're finding a lot with my product, Moss of the Isles. We're developing an actual moss breathing wall to put into the treatment rooms. Yeah, and that's, but I think that's where people are going. And I was desperate because with COVID, you know, we were standing on this precipice, and you know, there were two choices. We could either just go back to the old normal, and you know, or we could actually jump and let's see what happens. And I feel like my tribe, my wellness tribe, my people, I feel like we all jumped. And we're all now kind of discovering this new passion. I mean, years ago, at Aman in Utah, you know, we had whole conversation about kind of these treatment rooms, and we realized very quickly that the beauty, there's nothing that we could design inside this treatment room that would in any way match what's going on outside with these red rocks. And so we made these treatment rooms, and these treatment rooms, where half of the wall just kind of opens up, and so it suddenly becomes kind of, you know, half indoor, half outdoor treatment rooms. That's biophilic design. Because what we're doing is because nature wellness is out there. I mean, it's not in here at all. So biophilic design is definitely a big shift, and one that I think is such a long time coming, where we try to take the appreciation and the richness and the therapy of the beauty of nature and bring it into our lives. So it's like forest bathing on crack, really, because you put it everywhere. It's
Yeah.
around you. But I mean, I remember in Peru, we talk about Peru offline, but I remember in Peru, one of the things that when I was out in the villages in the Amazon forest was, it was so, people of all ages, they would be like, yeah, well, this tree does that, leaf does that, that tree does that. They were able to, it doesn't, I mean, just any tree. I mean, they were able to really, really simply, but expressly tell you what it does. And that I see remnant, and it's only remnants, but still I'll take remnants, but I see remnants of that coming into the wellness industry now, where people are just generally more interested in what nature can provide.
I think that squares really beautifully with another macro shift happening, which is this migration out of the cubicle farms of skyscrapers into homes and remote work, where it's really easy to never want to leave. I just moved into this new apartment, amazing views. I don't want to leave ever. But yet, if I look out of my window here, I see the Rockies and they're summoning my name. Hey, let's go mountain bike. Let's go ski. But I'm like, yeah, but I could just stay in the house and watch Netflix. And what's interesting about that shift from a different macro perspective is that the answer to a host of different wellness, health, spiritual mindset issues and the like is to get into nature.
Yes.
And so to bring that into an accessible space within the concrete jungle of the modern metro style living, which of course there's a lot of folks moving into suburbia, but still, nonetheless, that seems like a massive shift. Now, here's a question that you might not expect, which I guess definitionally you wouldn't expect the question, because we didn't rehearse these or anything prior to the show, but this just comes to mind. Is I'm profoundly interested in this notion of the metaverse and the digitization of everything, the tokenization of everything. And this is, not so much just a cryptocurrency thing, but particularly with the metaverse and people, for example, my little brother, he gets out of the Air Force and he's playing video games at midnight. I'm like, what are you doing? Go to the bars, meet people. He's like, I am hanging out with my friends in Fortnite. Like, what the hell is Fortnite? Oh, it's an alternate universe.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you see there being some sort of role particularly with virtual reality in the spa space. Now, prima facie, this sounds like the antithesis of biophilia and getting into nature, bringing nature into the spaces that we occupy in our dwellings. But is there a role for that, you think, in the future?
Yeah, look, there was a company, a spa product company that actually did that. They had facial or massages with the virtual reality thing. So I guess it's a twofold answer. Yes, it's happening. No, I don't believe it belongs in the wellness industry.
As I expected, but
Yeah.
I had to ask. As I expected.
Yeah, no. Look, as with everything, as with any industry, right? I mean, there's a lot of noise attached. So you, as a developer and a consultant, we always have to kind of go into the noise and pull out what's substantive and what's not. And no, it's not. That's not my bag at all.
Yeah.
It's just no. But yes, it's happening. I think that's a trend, and I think that won't be successful. I think we have to kind of move away in our industry from things that have substance and things that are Instagrammable. And I think, not just wellness industry, but just in general, I think that if something is Instagrammable, it's why we have, like, I don't know, the gold patches under their eyes and the mask and all those things that are all super Instagrammable and super successful for that reason. I mean, I don't know if they have any therapeutic benefit. I doubt some of it. But yeah, and I would imagine that gimmicks, I would prefer not to bring gimmicks into our industry. I just don't know that. I think we have a responsibility to be mindful and honest, and I think once we start throwing gimmicks at people, I I I, I doubt the therapeutic value, and I doubt how transformative. Here we go again. But I doubt the authenticity in terms of its wellness potential. And so no, I wouldn't personally do that.
We'll go ahead and drop that in the trend bucket,
That's in
aka
the
get out. You're not welcome here.
I can't. Listen. It's like the responsibility of being a developer, right? Is that you've got to go into a place, or you either create a space, but you either go into if you go into an existing space, you've got to understand what needs changing and what doesn't. I mean, the idea isn't for me to go into a spa and be like, oh, Nigel's been here. That's not the point. The point is that I have to, nurture what needs nurturing and remove what needs removing. And I I've been super diligent about my own authenticity over all of these years because I just love it. I love what I do, and I love that I'm not like. I also love that I'm not like I'm a hippie at heart, but I love that. I love that I don't necessarily fit into like the wellness. I'm not like going. Well, that's not true. I've done ashrams in India, but I'm just kind of like I feel like I'm just kind of a bit of a square peg in this industry because I'm not I'm not a beauty person. I'm a wellness person, and wellness is amorphous. It means 1,000 things to 1,000 different people, and so I have to be super conscious that I'm not creating wellness for me, and so it's a tricky one, and so I don't like the trends. A, they come with capex, but B, I don't see any value in them. And someone's paying me to make something beautiful. I have to be able to see the value in it. That's pretty much it. Yeah.
And on the one hand, I'm a bore, at least my own thinking, against the how would I put this? How would you verbify technology? The technologicalization of everything, and this shift towards atomization, social isolation. Hey, I don't need to see my friends. I can FaceTime them. No, go meet your friends, go into nature, and be human. And interestingly, this all comes back to being authentic and grow with our humanity.
Yeah, because look, like, which is why I do support things like forest bathing. It does. I wish maybe we could find something else to call it, but it is a beautiful thing. But it's not just beautiful for what it does for you spiritually in terms of your own wellness, but it also instigates conversations with the people around you that you couldn't have on FaceTime, or that you wouldn't feel compelled to, or you wouldn't understand that you could.
Right.
And so the growth is not just the experience itself. The growth is everything that comes with it, the thoughts that you have, the conversations that you have. So and with COVID, it was weird for me because, or for everybody, but I looked at COVID as kind of like a grief because it was kind of twofold. So you were kept away from your family for so long, and that's grief. Because you can't see your family, but then you could see them, but you weren't allowed to touch them. And then that's a whole other kind of grief. And so I really support anything that brings, that unites people, but unites them in a real focused way. I also support, I'm in Bavaria. I also support hanging out in beer gardens with my mates, but I really support environments that kind of promote conversation and changes of thought and healing. And yeah, you're right. You can't do that on FaceTime. FaceTime is, it's a temporary palliative, really, is what it is. Like the real thing comes face to face and touch, and that's it's an energetic thing, and yeah, and I that's what I think with the technology. Well, technology and wellness, I fully support. Technological advances, genomic research, all of that, fully support. I'm talking about like the virtual reality space, yeah. And I worry,
right?
Yeah, it's just, listen, if you can't get your guest into that virtual reality by themselves, then Yeah. Maybe don't be a therapist. I don't know.
Probably a sign of a greater issue.
Yeah.
Probably a sign of a greater issue, which is why, again, spa owners figure out a way to help your staff and your therapists develop their EQ, their social acuity, their willingness to be vulnerable, and empower them to do all of the above. So, well, I think, Nigel, I've got a couple more that we'll see if they're going to be quickies or not.
Okay.
Two more questions that are two sides of the same quarter here, let's say, and then we'll start landing the plane and get back to our work here. So the first question of the two before we close the show out is, what answers are most spa owners afraid to hear?
Gosh, what answers a spa owner's afraid to hear? God, I don't know. Kind of racking my brains on that one. What answers are spa owners afraid to hear? Probably all the answers that we've said this evening. Frankly, stop micromanaging your therapist. Leave them alone. Support them. Trust them. And yeah, I would. Yeah, pretty much most of what we've. Listen, I mean, there was an article about me a while ago, and it was like the wellness disruptor, which I thought was really kind of cool. But it just rings true with what you just. I'm like, actually, yeah, probably. And now I'm connecting it because they are probably everything that we've just talked about for the most part. But I would hope also spa operators take this. And this isn't coming from me sitting in my office. This is coming from 20 years traveling the world, understanding the industry, not even more than understanding it, but like being at the forefront of the evolution of it as well. I mean, and standing with it as it grew and grew and grew. We're now a 4.2 trillion dollar industry. We're 4 times the size of the pharmaceutical industry.
Wow.
So I don't say anything I say about the industry lightheartedly. So I would hope that even though they might disagree or might be confused with some of the answers, I certainly hope they understand that it's more than just my personal opinion. It coming from most of my life.
Yeah. Words worth heeding, in my estimation.
Yeah.
Well, the flip side of that coin then would be, what questions are most spa owners afraid to ask in your experience?
Afraid to ask
Of themselves, of their staff, of their mission, their vision, anything in that swim lane. Now, this may feel a little trappy or impossible to answer. So you can plead the fifth. There is a plead the fifth button, or phone a friend, or
yeah, it might be.
something else of the sort.
So what questions are they afraid to ask? I don't know. I know we're going to come off this call and I'll be like, damn it. I don't know. I don't know. Wellness is, as I said, wellness is such a tricky one. There's no one right way. There's a wrong way to do it, but there's no right way to do it, certainly. So I don't know. I'm not sure.
Fair enough. We'll smash the plead the fifth button, and we'll move over to the close here and land this plane. So not a big deal. I appreciate all the insights today on the show so far. So I think as a closing note, more than likely there's a number of hands raising in the audience saying, "Hey, I want to talk to Nigel. How do I get connected to this guy?" So maybe to give them or help them identify and self-select, yeah, I need Nigel because I'm having this frustration. What would you say are some of the frustrations that lead your clients to pick up the phone and say, "Nigel, I need you stat help"?
Well, morale, certainly, with their team. Clearer understanding on how to generate revenue without kind of diluting or destroying the vision, certainly. And then just obviously, I design spas, but then, we train therapists, we discuss product choice, those kind of things. But generally, I think, if your spa is in status quo, and if it needs an emotional, spiritual wedgie, if it needs to just, the thing with this industry, it's growing and shaking and moving and baking, and it's very easy to close your eyes and suddenly be irrelevant. I hate that word, but you know what I mean? So I think, certainly, we've discussed this. Certainly, if you're interested in empowering your therapists and developing your therapists, who will in turn develop their spa, but also maintaining, coming out of the status quo and maintaining a constant stream of evolution, which is really where you need to be in this industry, because you close your eyes and guests are going somewhere else for something else. So it's important to stay energized. It's important to stay energized and relevant. So for that, spa development is business development. We just happen to be in the business of wellness. So, it's a way to develop every aspect of your business, but do it in an authentic way, and in a way that is anchored to the very core nature of wellness.
Yeah. Well, if I can bolt on one other reason to connect with Nigel for the listeners, again, I'm going to come back to Verena, who says any team would grow their sales by training with Nigel. So if any of this resonates with you listeners, I would implore you, and I'm very leery with who I implore my listeners to engage with and reach out to, but Nigel is absolutely at the top of that docket. I would strongly suggest reaching out. So how do they find you? Do you have an email? What's your Twitter, your Facebook, your whatever?
Yeah,
how do they connect?
Find me. Yeah, I'm the Spa Whisperer throughout. So you can find me at thespawhisperer.com. You can find me on Instagram at the Spa Whisperer. My spa design company is called Moss Wellness Consultancy, and you can find that on mosswellnessconsultancy.com. And you can also find my product, mossoftheisles.com. Moss of the Isles and Moss of the Isles on Instagram, that kind of thing.
Awesome.
And if you,
awesome.
can I give my email if anybody wants to email me?
Please do.
Super easy. Nigel at mosswellnessconsultancy.com. There we go.
Beautiful, poetic, terse, to the point. Fabulous. Yeah. Awesome. Well, hey, I've enjoyed the time, and I'm sure our paths will cross again. And sure. Again, thanks for carving out this window to join us on the show today.
Thanks for finally having me.
All right, Nigel, be well. We'll talk soon.
Thanks for everybody for listening as well. Appreciate it, Austin. Thank you.